So I'm just going to give you the full demo here. So let's make a new Java project. And when you do, just ca.lastname.averager, next, finish, create. And then let's make ourselves a new class. So I'm going to right click on the project, new class, and let's just call it averager. And we want to turn on the public static void main because that's where our program is going to begin. And here we go. So main is where our program is going to begin. So the key to this program here is that to input from the console, we need a thing called the buffered reader. Now in Eclipse, kind of like in Visual Studio, remember it can figure out things for you. So capital B in buffered, capital R in reader. If you push Control Space, it will try and complete it. And we're going to call this our reader. And the reader will be equal to a new buffered reader. And we're going to attach it to system.in. Oops, made a mistake. This needs to get attached to a new input stream reader, which gets attached to system.in. If it gives you a bad input, then use Control-Shift-O to import, and we want the java.io. There we go. And let's check with saving. That looks good. Okay, so clarifying. The buffered reader is going to be attached to the console, but it needs to use a stream. System.in gets attached using a stream reader and then to the buffered reader. Details, not important. The key thing to know is that we can use reader.readline. So let's just do a quick little test here. So let's define a string called text. And let's have this do in reader.readline. And we're just going to spit this out to the console. So, a shortcut I should maybe mention. If you type in sysout, S-Y-S-O-U-T, and then Control Space, Eclipse will auto-complete that for you. So what this is going to do is just prompt you to type in a line of text, receive it from the console, and then just say, hey, you typed in, and spit it back out. Now in here we've got an unhandled exception. The details for this are not super important, but basically streams can be attached to the console or to the internet or to your hard drive or a USB stick or whatever. And sometimes, internet connections fail and you maybe unplug a USB stick or something like that. So they can fail if your connection dies. In this case, I'm not going to worry about that failure because the console in Eclipse should never fail, and we're just getting going with this, so I don't really care. So I'm just going to click on the add throws declaration, and it's going to add throws IO exception up at the top here. Basically, it's just going to kill the program if something goes bad in the console. And for the purposes of this demo, that's totally fine by me. So let's run this and try it. So in my package explorer, which you've hopefully got on the left, we're going to run as Java application. And your console comes up, says type in a line of text. What's up, guy? And it just spits it back. So that's how input works. So now let's try and put together the averaging system. So our first thing that we are going to do is we're going to ask how many numbers would you like to average? So okay, so how many numbers would you like to average? Now pull that line of text from the console. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to convert this to an int. So I'm going to call this count. And in order to convert from a string to an int, you're going to use capital I integer dot parse int. And this is going to convert it to a signed decimal integer. So signed meaning positive or negative, and decimal meaning base 10. And here we go. So we're going to convert that line of text to count. So remember in the example here, I showed you that I wanted to check and make sure that it was going to be at least 2. So let's make an if statement here. So if the count is larger than or equal to 2, open a curly bracket, and we'll just say, okay, averaging, and then you're going to add a plus here with the count. So just say, okay, that's fine, and we're good to go. Else if the count is 1. Now when I'm testing if two things are the same, notice how we use double equals here. The single equals is for setting a variable. Here we're going to output averaging, oh my god, one number seems useless. Try again. And now the else part of this means it wasn't 2 or greater, it wasn't 1, it's any other situation. So this would be 0, -1, -2, anything smaller than that. And let's just give an error message here as well. So I'm just going to say can't average and we're going to insert the number in between here. So that's going to be this code right here. So we can't average that count number of numbers. So try again. And because I want this code to run until I get at least 2, what we're going to do here is we're going to make a while loop. And the while loop that I'm going to make here is called while successfully picked count is equal to false. So we're going to have a Boolean here, which will be either true or false. And we're going to start it out with false, and then it's going to become true when we get at least 2 or more. So let's declare that variable here, a little bit of a shortcut. We've used a variable that it hasn't got defined yet, so let's create it. And it picks up that it's a Boolean because it's noticing that we're checking if it's a false. So that looks good. And we want to have it start out with a value of false. So it starts out false. We're going to run the while loop. And then this loop, just using the tab key here, keeps running until we get one with at least 2. Let's try it. So you can use the run button at the top here. How many numbers would you like to average? Negative, a whole lot. Nope, can't. Oh, okay. Haha. So it spat this out a whole zillion times in the console here. I made a dumb mistake. So we want to have it ask this, how many numbers would you like to average inside of the loop? So let's put this into the while loop so that it asks us to type it in every single time. So let's take that. I'm going to go cut and paste into the loop. So now it's going to keep asking, how many do you want to average, and grab that number. Let's try this. So how many numbers would you like to average? Negative something. Can't do that. How many would you like to average? How about just -2? Nope, doesn't like it. 0. Nope, don't like it. 1. Oh, here we go. So that's our that seems useless thing. And now once I give it 4, it says, okay, that's good enough for me. We're going to average 4 numbers. So now what we need to do is we need to have a place to store our numbers. So we're going to have this program just take in ints. You could do it with floats as well if you like, but I'm just going to do this with an int. So we're going to make an int array. So we're going to have indexes 0 up to however many that we type in. So int, and then square brackets in Java here is for declaring an array. And let's call this inputs. And we want count of them. So the syntax here is this is an array of integers, so it's going to be indexes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. The name is inputs. And I'm making a new array of them with count number of them. And the count is going to be whatever got typed in by this loop here. A little bit of a Java thing comes along here. Eclipse is worried that count doesn't have a number in it yet. We know that count is going to have at least 2 here because of this code here, but Eclipse is not smart enough to figure out this loop is going to have the number in it. So let's just make sure that count has at least a number. So I'm just going to put count equals 1 up here. And that's really just to satisfy Eclipse to make sure that count has a number in it. But it should never have 1 in it once it gets here because the count should be at least 2. So go ahead and just put an equals 1 up there. And now what we're going to do here is we're going to fill in each of those inputs. So a while loop, and we're going to have an index for this. So I is going to be less than the count. So let's declare an I for index, and start it out at 0. And 2 options here at the bottom. You can have an I plus equals 1, or you can have an I plus plus. These are the same thing. They're both going to increment it by 1. And let's now prompt the user, let's have you input number. And for the text, we're going to have it display I plus 1. And the reason for that is the first number we input is index 0, but we often refer to it as the first number. So I'm just going to add +1 to it so that it actually displays more sort of human readable. And now we're going to pull in from the console. We can throw that into text. And then into this inputs variable at index I, what we want is whatever got typed being converted to an integer. So we're going to use this integer.parseInt again. Now let's take these numbers and total them up. And that'll be a nice way to check and make sure that we're on the right track. And we can test this with some easy numbers that we can add in our head. So what we need to do now is have another int for the total. And our total can start at 0. And let's add together all of those numbers. So again, start your index at 0. And let's go through up to the count. We need our index going up by 1. And the total gets plus equals. Total goes up by each of those inputs. So inputs I. So the first time it's going to go up by input 0. The second time it'll go up by inputs 1 and inputs 2 and inputs 3. And then after that loop, let's output the total to the console. So we can just say that the sum is at this point. Let's try that. So we're going to input 3 numbers here. I'm going to go with 7 and 4 and 2. Which should be 7 plus 4 is 11, plus 2 more is 13. And there's our sum. Now we need to divide. So the key to this here is that don't forget integers don't allow decimal places. So what we're going to actually do here is we're going to convert this total here. We're not going to have it be just an int. We're going to have this be a float because float will allow decimal places. And now our average is going to be equal to the total divided by the count. And the reason that I've switched the total to a float here is so that it does the dividing and comes up with the decimal places here. And let's come up and display that now. The average is, and we'll try this with some easy numbers here. So let's go with 3 numbers with 2, 2, and 9. There we go. So we got some decimals.